I'm going to just show you my some of my things here. Okay, so you got to have a notebook. If you guys haven't heard me talk about notebooks, I have dozens of notebooks. I really do. I mean, just sitting here, I've got 3 right at my fingertips. This is kind of a day-to-day, some of the things I'm thinking of here. This is a technical notebook that I use to remember technical settings. Because when you go through, like, how did I figure out that audio setting or whatever it is? Look at the green screen, it's picking it up. Write it down, because maybe you spent an hour Googling around until you found that one setting. Or, that menu, that one item that's buried in some menu in your camera and you keep forgetting where it is. If you're like me, write it down. You can always refer back to it. So I keep technical notebooks, and I keep inspirational notebooks, and I keep records of, changes that I'm kind of developing in my business and that sort of thing. Okay. You got to keep notebooks, guys. So I'm going to give you the points out of this blog post, and we're going to talk about what area. Number 1, I want you to write these in your notebook. Not now, but after the show. What areas would you like to improve? Be honest with yourself. You might be aware that you need to get on top of something that's been a stumbling block for you. What is it? Write that down. Maybe you're having trouble processing. Maybe you're having trouble with lighting. Maybe you're having trouble working with people, posing them. That's a whole art in itself. You have to, as a photographer, you have to direct people and be interactive with them. Maybe you need to up your communication skills. Whatever those things are, be honest with yourself, write them down. What do you need to improve? Okay. And step 2, what genre of images would you really like to be capturing that you aren't right now? Step out of your comfort zone. So maybe you've always wanted to photograph nudes. We did that in art school. Okay. Maybe you want to photograph nighttime. Maybe you want to photograph in the middle of the night. Maybe you want to photograph daybreak. Whatever it is, genre or timing or whatever, write those things down. What's in your mind there? By the way, I don't want you to filter any of these things. I don't want you to self-criticize, and I don't want you to filter. On number 1, just be honest with yourself. That's not self-criticism. If you know you're struggling with posing people, okay, write it down. So number 2 is, what are those genres that you've always wanted to jump into? No filter. Just write it down. This is just between you and you. We're not going to publish this. Nobody has to look at this. Okay. What are your plans to study other people's work? That's so important. You heard me talk about it over and over again, and I do it constantly. So you should have a plan. What work do you, and obviously that's going to go along with the genre that you want to explore. So as an example, I love environmental portraiture. Environmental portraits are where you're capturing somebody in their own environment, and you're photographing them. Arnold Newman was the guy who actually coined that phrase, I believe. I hear some different versions of it. I'm pretty sure he coined the phrase environmental portraiture, or somebody else named it after him. And he's an amazing photographer. Look at his work. Igor Stravinsky at the piano, this huge grand piano, and Stravinsky's in the lower left corner about this big. That's an amazing environmental portrait. Absolutely amazing. Portraiture of Pablo Picasso. His portraits, I just find them fantastic. To me, it may not be to you, but find those photographers or artists that really cause you to expand your viewpoint and you resonate with it. Take your notebook and write down, what is it that makes you resonate? What it does with Arnold Newman is he's using the space of the frame to tell the story about that person. He's not thinking in terms of any guidelines. He's not thinking like, well, I need a rule of thirds and then, they should be prominent in the frame or any of that BS. He is using the frame to tell the story. and doing it as effectively as he wants to. Break some rules. Go for it. There are no rules anyway. There's guidelines, but there's no rules of composition. So study others' work. And if you can get to museums, you should do that if they're open. If they're not, try to use books, because the photograph on the wall or the painting on the wall is going to be the best thing to study, the actual work of art. Second to that is a book, printed beautifully. You can get those out of a library if you have access to a library, or you can go to a bookstore, you can buy them on Amazon, whatever. Get your collection going if you don't already have one. Bob Holmes has an enormous collection of photography books and art books, huge. And we covered it in my class with him. We actually shot over his shoulder him looking through some of his favorite books. Saldago, and why am I mispronouncing that? Excuse my tongue. Anyway, he has some favorite artists, modern artists, and you should actually take that class if you haven't already. That would be a goal right there, because you're going to get a lot of wisdom out of that. So figure out who you want to study and study them. Look at their lighting. Write these things down in your notebook. Their lighting, how they compose, how they use the frame, anything else that springs out, write it down. It really does help you to focus when you write these things down. Now, this is an extension of the above, but are there any skills? Number 4 is any skills that you really want to master this year? So maybe you want to get into artificial lighting. Maybe you want to studio lighting. Maybe you want to really nail your processing down. Whatever those skills are, write those things down too. Okay? Maybe it's filmmaking. Maybe you want to jump from still photography to filmmaking, and you put that down on your list. That's number 4. Now, this is what I consider the most important and fun step of all. I totally no filter, no self-criticism. I want you to just go wild and write down. This is specifics. Before we were talking about the general categories of like nudes or whatever, but I want you to write down like a shot list that you really want to capture this year. Write those things down and let your mind just go. Don't think, oh, well, I can't go to Paris, because just write it down. If you want to photograph a nude on the Eiffel Tower, or you want to photograph the Eiffel Tower at dawn, whatever it is, write it down. Who knows? Just put it there. If you don't let yourself like fantasize a little bit, let your mind go. You're free to do this in your own mind and your own notebook. Write those things down. Whatever those things that come to mind, write them down and put those on your list. Now we've got 5 things that are going to definitely shape your goals this year. And the next step is to kind of look those over and just set yourself some goals. And that can include, how much time are you going to get out and photograph every week? The photographs that you do not capture don't magically appear. The time you don't spend on photography, it doesn't just fall out of the sky. You have to work at it. The Beatles, 70 hours a week. There is that, I consider it a bit of a myth. Maybe there's some truth to it, about how you have to do 10,000 hours to master something. And I've certainly put in my 10,000 hours in a lot of different fields. I don't believe that that's necessarily true, and I see a lot of exceptions to it, one of them being Jimmy Chin. Almost by accident became a photographer. He borrowed a friend's camera who was on an assignment. They sent the images into the client, and the only image they chose was the one that Jimmy took, and that launched his career. But he's certainly put in his 10,000 hours, or many, many more. Bob Holmes, all these guys that I interview, I mean, they're way beyond 10,000 hours. They're into 50, 60, 70,000. So you got to do the work. There's no shortcut on that, because it's familiarity and just There's that thing about getting up when you don't want to get up and going out and shooting because you gave yourself your own assignment and you're not going to slack off. That is a huge point in all creativity. And I'm reading a number of biographies right now, or I have recently, one about Paul McCartney, the lyrics, where he talks about the lyrics of some of their key songs. I'm at the end of Dave Grohl's autobiography or memoir. Dave Grohl from Nirvana, who's the drummer in Nirvana. And then, of course, he started the Foo Fighters. Amazingly talented guy. Man, that guy worked hard and still does. Really just put the time in. I don't know anybody else who became world-class drummer for Nirvana and then started a group, became the lead singer. He wasn't a lead singer, a songwriter, and lead guitarist. That's like unheard of. There's many, many fantastic drummers, but you don't hear about them also becoming songwriters, lead guitarists. There's Phil Collins, who of course has an amazing voice, and he's a drummer and a singer. I'm not sure if he's a songwriter, maybe he is, but I don't know that he's also mastered a whole other instrument like guitar. So a lot of hard work goes into making your goals. Roll those 5 points that I gave you into your goals, including what time you're going to invest. And I say invest. You are investing in your creativity when you put time and energy into it. Really, everything you do brings you that much closer to you ultimately achieving your goals. Even if you, quote, fail, you can use that and should use it as a springboard to improve yourself. The great people who have mastered things are not afraid to fail, and they do fail. And I fail at things, and I definitely step back and learn. Okay, why did I fail? Why did that fail? What was wrong with that? How can I fix that so it doesn't happen again? One of my first assignments that I got as a photographer, it was a very mundane assignment to go shoot a meeting at a church. And I knew nothing about using a speed light, a strobe. What a Dumbo. And I didn't test my equipment. Big no. If you're going to go out on something you've never done before, you better test your equipment and you better know how it works. And I didn't do that. I fiddled around with it a little bit. I showed up. The shots were all wrong. And I failed on my very first assignment. And I got a letter that just crushed me. Not one of your images was usable. And we heard that you were a professional. And, terrible. Do you think that ever happened again? No, sir. Never did that happen again. So lesson number 1 became like a life lesson. Know your equipment. Don't ever experiment when you're on the job. You better know it before you go out. Don't be an idiot. But I learned from that. I never made that mistake again. Please subscribe and enable the bell so you don't miss any of our new shows. Like the video and please share it and leave your comments. I love hearing from you. And remember to get out and capture your own images of life.